In the last exercise, we saw what might be considered a problem with the keyword this. It doesn't provide what we may want it to provide. If we understand the rules applied to the keyword this, we can understand why it does what it does, but it still may not be what we want. There are some ways to change that or to control the object referenced by the keyword this. But before we get into that, let's look at some of the other situations that are common problems. Now first, in the previous exercise, we looked at a problem like the one shown here. Now, this code works as we would expect, as long as we know the rules, but it doesn't necessarily make sense. For example, let's just run that or take a look at it. We see that console 3, we get the object, but console 4 is undefined. Now, it's undefined because we're using strict mode. And so if we had not used strict mode, it would reference the default object, which is the window object. So if we look at this code here, why would we put the keyword this inside of that function unless we wanted to refer to the object? So that is one situation where we may need to control the object referenced by the keyword this. The keyword this gets assigned the default object, the window, or undefined if we're in strict mode. And that may not be what we want in this particular type of situation. Now, a second problem we encounter is when we lose the object that this keyword is bound to. This is one of the most common frustrations regarding the keyword this. So let's look at some examples that illustrate this problem. I will try to keep the code as simple as possible so we can focus on the problem and not so much on the code. So let me go ahead and comment out what we have here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to first set up a function. I'm going to call it display name. And basically all this function is going to do is to log to the console a name. But the way we're going to log that name to the console is using this.name. Therefore, we'll need something for the this keyword to refer to. Now, down below it, I'm going to create an object. I'm going to set that object to have a name property, Steve, like that. And then also, I want it to have a method. And the method I'm going to put is exactly this one I've defined up here. Now, we can do that like this. Put a colon in and put display name. But because of shorthand that is available now, it's pretty simple to just do it this way. We can just do it like that. And because this is already defined up here, it will make the property point to that function. All right? So now we have those two things set up. Let's go ahead and take a look what happens if we do console.log, and inside of that we call obj.displayName. Okay? Is it going to display the right information? If you look at that, what do you think is going to happen? Now let me go ahead and resize this a bit so we can see the console right away. And I will save it. And we can see that it displays Steve. So it's working correctly for us. It's working how we want it to. OBJ is invoking that method, and so this refers to OBJ and it grabs the correct name. All right, now let's do something different. Let's go ahead and declare a variable here, and let's set that variable equal to obj.displayName, to the method that's a part of that object. Now if we do console.log and then we enter show name and we invoke that, what is it going to display? So this is a bit different. This is a bit different now. Now following the rules, you can probably figure that out. If we save this, we see that we get a type error. Cannot read property name of undefined. So this becomes undefined once we assign it to that variable there. And so we have lost the object that was referenced by this simply by assigning that method to another variable. That's not probably expected behavior. We can see the rules once again, but that's not expected behavior. We would want it to retain the correct value for this so that we could use a shortened version of perhaps this method here. Okay? So that's one problem we encounter. And that problem occurs when we pass a reference to a method to another variable. Now, we also have some issues that occur because of callbacks. We can lose the value of this because of a callback. And so we need to look at those as well. Now I'm going to comment out this one. I'm keeping all of this code in here so that you'll have access to it. And we're going to do 3 callback examples. So I'm going to just mark this one as callback example 1. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to scroll up so you can see that better. First thing I'm going to do is set up an object. And this will be somewhat similar to what we had before, but there will be a little bit different. Some differences. And the main difference is I'm going to set up the method inside here instead of setting it up outside. But I am going to call it display name. And then we'll just add a console log this.name like that. All right. So there's our object, and we're going to be using that in several of these examples. So now I want to create a function here. So I'm going to call this just do function because the purpose of this function is just to invoke another function. That's all it does. And so we're passing in a callback for that. And then, as is a common practice, we want to check if that callback is a function, because we don't want to try to invoke it if it's not. And so just putting that if statement in there, and then we invoke the callback like that. Okay, so there we have an object and we have a function. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to call that function, do function, and we're going to pass in as the callback, we're going to pass in obj.displayName. And then let's see what happens here. So if I save that, as you probably guessed, we're getting a type error again. It's not able to find that. So if we were to change this, just so we can see what the value of this is, console log.this, and I comment out this one up above and save that. Now we can see it's undefined. Because we're using strict mode, it's undefined. If we remove strict mode, it would be the default object. It would be window. So that's one callback example where we lose the value of this, lose the object reference by the keyword this. Okay, callback example 2. I want to show you 3 of them because these are 3 types of things you can run into when doing this. All right, let me go ahead and comment out this one now. And in this example 2, I'm going to use the same object like I mentioned. So let me go ahead and copy that. And we'll just bring that down here below example 2. So we're going to use that same object. This time, we're going to use set timeout. So set timeout, and then obj.displayName. So same type of structure here, and then we'll wait 2 seconds. Now let me go ahead and comment out that one, comment this, so we can just see if it gets the name, and save that. After 2 seconds, we're not seeing anything. Notice we don't get the error. We don't get the error that we had before. And if you think about how set timeout is handled, remember set timeout is handled by the browser. and then this is placed in the event queue. And so it's handled a bit differently than this callback up here. And so because of that, useStrict doesn't set it to undefined. And we can see that if we uncomment, just change that right there. And after 2 seconds, we see it's the window. So it doesn't set it to undefined. And because of how setTimeout is handled, we then get the window object. All right, so that is callback example 2. Once again, we lost the object referenced by the keyword this when this was placed inside of setTimeout, when that method was. All right, we are going to copy this again for the last example. And let me go ahead and comment all of that out. And we'll do callback example 3. Let's paste in that object. And now what are we going to do with this one? This one's going to be an event listener on something on the HTML page. So we have a div here. This is the common issues with keyword this. This is the text that shows up. I'm going to add an ID to that and just set it equal to the same thing that the class is, title2. Save that. That will cause the code to run again, but we'll just get the same results. And then what I'm going to do now is grab that. I'll just call it title. I'll use the variable title. Document.get element by ID, and the ID is going to be title2. And so I'm going to grab that element from the HTML page, and then I'm going to add an event listener to it. So here's where we'll do that. Title.add event listener, and the event is the click event. I'm just going to click on that div. And what do we want it to do? Well, once again, I'm going to do the obj.display name. That's the method that I want to fire when I click on that. And let's go ahead and uncomment this again. And we'll save that. Now, in order for this one to work, I'm going to need to click on that div. And we get undefined. There is no name. Now, we can see the value of this once again. Save that. Come out, click on it. Notice what the value of this becomes now. It's the actual element on the HTML file. And so we think it should be this object, but it's not. It loses. It loses that reference. And so we looked at 3 callback examples where the reference is lost, and we looked at assigning a method to another variable, and we lose the reference to the object in the keyword this. And then first off, we looked at the problem we had from the last exercise, where it does work by the rules assigned to the keyword this, but it's not what we want. If we're going to put the keyword this here, we would want it to refer to the object that it's contained in. All right, so those are the things we need to solve, and we're going to be looking at how we can solve that. Some commands that are available in JavaScript to help us solve those issues. All right, let's move on.